topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. This is Divya, and thrilled to be here because I love being with you. For those of you who have got our books, either The Entrepreneur's Garden, and yes, it can be of help to you regardless whether you're an entrepreneur or if you're looking to have good relationships with money or people or learning how to network or learning how to thrive regardless where you are. Or if you're looking to become an influencer who creates impact. Through Influence, The Next Book to Influencer is the book for you. It's all about creating impact. And the best part about this is that when you buy the book from us, partial profits from book sales go to global entrepreneurs all across. And we usually will share it out with kiva.org. So check our books out. And I would like to thank each and every one of you who have got our books and shared their experiences with us. And also invite you and highly encourage you to share 1 hour of your time every month, helping somebody else with no strings attached. So let's bring our guest on.
Hi.
Welcome, Rachel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you on the show. So, Rachel, usually we start out with a childhood moment. So, do you recall a moment that stands out for you even today?
Yes. When I was 8 years old, before I would go to school, I would scan the house for steak knives because my mom self-harmed, and I would hide them. So before school each morning, I would hide all the knives in the house, trying to protect her. And it's funny because most people tell their kids knives are too sharp for the kid, but I felt like my mom wasn't safe with knives, so I ended up hiding them from her.
So sorry to hear that. Sounds like you became an adult when you were a child.
Yes, in many ways I was.
So tell us more about your childhood as to what happened that you were left at hiding out steak knives.
So my mom had manic depressive bipolar disorder, and she required a lot of emotional support. And so she kind of I was the oldest of her 3 kids, the only daughter, and she leaned on me heavily for that emotional support. And so from a young age, I was treated as her equal, and it made me feel important. It made me feel needed. It made me feel like a big kid. But over time, I grew to resent that role because I couldn't carry it anymore.
And if I may ask, was there a dad in the picture?
Yes. I did have a dad. He worked most of the day, but of course he was also affected by her need to be emotionally supported. So when he was at work and I was at home with her all day, I was her go-to person.
So as you were growing up through such difficult times, how did you find any normalcy, or you didn't find any normalcy in your life?
It's funny. You only know what you know when you're a kid. So I thought it all was normal. But I also think, if there's something traumatic that happens throughout the day, but then the last 2 hours of your evening, you're watching a movie, eating movie treats, you kind of cling to those moments of normalcy and you're willing to forget the rest. So we had moments every day that were normal, and we just kind of, me and my brothers, chose to focus on those.
That's good. And how's your relationship with your siblings?
Wonderful. Wonderful. We feel like we're a little army that we're in a foxhole together, and we all came out stronger and more bonded because we survived together.
So tell us a few moments from your childhood or from ever, how did y'all become so strong together, and how did y'all bond, and what went through?
Yeah. So we didn't have a ton of friends growing up, so we were each other's friends. We moved around a lot, so we were always the new kids. And then my parents told us to never tell anyone about my mom's bipolar disorder. They said that if we told anyone, then they wouldn't be allowed to play at our house anymore because their parents would be, I don't know, afraid. There was a lot of stigma around bipolar disorder. And so my brothers and I became each other's friends, and it was really great. I really enjoyed my time with them.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And as you grew up, what interest did you have?
As I grew up, I was a aspiring author. I really wanted to be a writer, but I had dyslexia. And so I was at a kindergarten reading level in 3rd grade and almost had to repeat 3rd grade. But because of my mom's bipolar disorder, she also has incredible stamina and grit. And so she worked with me, and we did tutoring all day, every day, until I got caught up. And I think that's one of the reasons I was able to become an author today, is because she was willing to work with me.
So is being author your full-time job?
It is. It is.
So tell us about that journey.
So I wrote my mom's memoir. And so that was kind of a tender moment for me, because I felt like I lived a lot of her life next to her, but writing this book, An Impossible Life, I got to step in her shoes and relive all those moments from her perspective. And we did a lot of laughing. There was a lot of funny stuff she did. And then it was just very tender. That book is definitely my love letter to her.
Very profound. So you mentioned that initially, when your mom leaned on you, you felt important. And then as you grew up, you started resenting that. When did that happen? And tell us about the emotions that you experienced.
Yeah, I'd say in college. So my mom called a lot. She would call around 14 times a day, and I would answer all the calls because I didn't know if she was in crisis, if she needed me. I mean, it could be anything. She needs help picking out shoes at TJ Maxx, or, she's having suicidal thoughts and needs to be talked down. So I would always answer her calls. And in college, I just was burning out. I had no real life outside of my mom's. I felt like I didn't have my own life. I was existing to help mom live hers. And so I started resenting it, and I would break down a lot crying, and we would fight. And then I'd feel bad because she needs me. And so it wasn't until I got therapy that I learned how to have a productive relationship with her, with boundaries, but equal amounts of caring. You can still care for someone, even if there's boundaries in place.
So are you okay if we do a little bit deeper dive? Because, there are a lot of people who may be going through similar relationships, whether it's with their mom or spouse or dad or.
Yeah.
So when you said that you felt that you had to respond, where was that coming from?
I think it was coming from, so when you're a child, you learn pretty early on that survival is a connection to your caretaker. And so I think because as a kid, I knew in order to survive, I have to have a close bond with my parent. Even though I became older and I could survive without her, I was kind of afraid to give up that bond. So if she was reaching out, I felt the need to reciprocate because I didn't want to have that connection broken.
Mm. And what if that connection would have broken? What was it that kept you bound to that connection?
Probably a fear that she would take her life. I thought, since she struggled with suicidal ideation, that if I stepped back or in any way made her feel alone in her pain, that she couldn't handle it, and so she would take her life.
So that was a lot of burden for a young one to bear, regardless whether you're a child or even in your teens or in college. So as you work through your emotions, what emerged for you?
As I worked through my emotions, I realized that I needed to create an identity outside of being my mom's caretaker, because so much of who I was I'm a good, friend. I'm a good daughter. I'm a good caretaker of mom. And my therapist worked with me on trying to learn that my mom's an adult. She has a husband. I'm an adult. I have a husband, where there needs to be separation there. And I can create an identity outside of being her caretaker. And it was really sweet. I talked to my mom after, and she was like, "You're right. I took something from you that wasn't mine to take. I'm sorry. I want to work on giving that back to you. I want to give you back what I took." And so she's almost changed overnight, which is phenomenal. Just always checking on me and making sure that I know that she doesn't need me to take care of her anymore, that she's doing better.
Hmm. Can you define that moment? How did that come to be about? Because here she was leaning on you for several and so many years. And then what was that conversation that happened?
Yeah. So what happened is it's funny. I thought it was pretty obvious that I was drowning, that it was so overwhelming for me to take care of her and try to live a life outside of her. And she was completely oblivious. She's like, "I had no idea." And so it was just me being able to go to therapy, find the words to describe what I was going through. And I called her and I said, "Mom, I think we're enmeshed. I think our relationship is so bound and together that, I don't have a life outside of you." And she was like, "Oh, I don't want that. I want you to have your own life. I want you to have your own identity." And so she was like, "Tell me how I can help fix it." And so I gave her a few ideas. I was like, maybe call less. And if I don't answer the phone, don't text me like, "Why aren't you answering?" Da, 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 da. Because I was like, that makes me feel panicked. And so she's called way less. She doesn't get mad if I don't answer the phone. And then I told her, just don't vent and, emotionally dump on me, because she loves to call and just emotionally unload. And so I told her, when you do that, I feel like you're asking me to fix it, and it's a lot to take on. And so whenever we call now, she always asks like, "Hey, am I emotional dumping or am I okay?" And I'm like, "No, you're fine. Like, that was fine." And so she's been really conscious of how I'm feeling, which is very nice.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. So now let's say if there's another person in your situation, where could they get started?
Yeah, I would say definitely therapy, just to identify the why. Why did this happen? Why do you feel the need to keep stepping up? Why, because in some ways you're almost self-sabotaging in some ways, right? You're putting your
Mhm.
life on pause or on hold, and that's not a good thing. And so figuring out the why am I doing this? And then assessing if that's a reason you think is, effective or non-effective. I would say that's the biggest thing, because I didn't even realize I was doing it. I just knew I was exhausted. I was so tired. I was very emotional, and I couldn't figure out why. And once I went to therapy, I was like, "Oh, I am taking on my mom's life. I need to create my own." So, but just becoming
Mhm.
aware that it's even happening.
So once you realized, so what I'm hearing is that it's important to become aware
Mhm.
that what you're doing, because as you mentioned, you didn't even know that you were doing, And then the second step that I'm hearing is that, why are you doing that? Because if you know the causation behind it, then you know the effect that's having on other people, effect that's having on yourself. So once you found that, and so many times what happens is that even if you may have awareness, just like a lot of people are not able to lose their weight, they're aware, they know that they're making that choice, and they still go and do either binge eating or binge watching or drinking alcohol. So what was it that after the awareness that happened that you were able to create that boundary?
I would say it was, so I have a daughter, and it was for the first time in my life, I felt like something was more important than what my mom wanted. And
Mm,
until I became a parent, I didn't feel like I had anything that could ever be more important than keeping mom alive and happy. I was like, there's, me going on a date with my husband, me having a hobby, me wanting to read a book. None of those things seemed important enough to not answer her calls, to not make her my number one priority. But after having my own child, I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep doing the things I was doing for her. And it's because I realized something's more important than what mom wants. And it's my daughter. I have to put her first.
that definitely makes sense. And is that when you realized that my daughter is more important for me, that you had that conversation with her?
It is. It is. I remember being at the park and my daughter wanting me to push her on the swing and go down the slide. And at the same time, I'm talking to my mom, and my mom's wanting me to validate her and listen to her emotional struggles. And both of them are mad at me. My daughter's mad that I'm not totally present with her. And then my mom's upset because she's like, you're not even listening. You're just at the park with Indy. And I realized I can't do both. If I try to do both, they're both mad. They're both unhappy. And so I had to tell her I have to choose Indy. If I'm at the park with her, if I'm out with her, I'm with her. I can't take her calls. But when she's napping or at the end of the day, if you'd like to talk once or twice a day, that's fine. So that was a big learning curve for me. Sometimes I have my phone out, and when she calls, I let it ring just to prove to myself that I can do it. I just watch it ring and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to answer.
Prove to myself that I can do it.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of people in a similar situation where, as you mentioned, that there is that bond or connection that they don't want to break.
Mhm.
So what's a good way for them to set boundaries? And we'll come back to the next question. So the first step is, what I'm hearing is that you had to set boundaries. First step was having that conversation
Yeah. So
with the person that you're in that relationship with. So what would you say are the key elements that people can use in that conversation?
yeah. So I'll be honest, the conversation I had with my mom about boundaries did not go well. In fact, we almost ended our relationship over it. She was never going to talk to me again, because it was so jarring. I was, so pivotal in her life to, hey, I want distance, and distance in any form seemed like rejection to her. So I didn't word things right. I'm sure I could have worded things better, but what happened is she felt like I was dictating how the relationship was going to be. Where I was trying to muster up all this courage just to say I needed a boundary, and she took it as I'm dictating how the relationship's going to be, because I had never really pushed back on anything. So it felt very dramatic for her. So what happened that worked really well is she said, I want to create boundaries together. I want us both to set them, so that way I know what the boundary is, so I don't cross it, but also so I feel like it's a relationship we're building together, instead of you just telling me how it's going to be and I have to deal with it. And so that worked for us. We just created the relationship together by discussing the boundaries and saying, is that something you're okay with? Is that something I'm okay with? And if not, talk it out. Why not? Right?
Mm-hmm. So from what it sounds like is that first is, it's really important to muster up the courage and have the difficult conversation, because if you're not going to have the difficult conversation, the other person may not even know what's going on, and your relationship is not even healed. And when anything is out of balance, it's going to take a toll
Correct.
on the relationship, on the person. And while you're having that conversation is bring in both the parties. And this can go for anyone, whether in personal or professional relationship, and let them be part of the solution. Because when both the parties or three parties, doesn't matter, when people are in agreement of what's being discussed and what needs to be achieved, then they feel like they have a voice, they're being heard, and then they're more apt to comply with it or follow through those actions. What are your thoughts?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And people have more emotional investment in it because it's like a boundary they now care about too because they helped make it. Where if it's a boundary only you created, there's not a lot of emotional connection for them to be like, yeah, that's something I want to adhere to. But I think you nailed it. By creating it together, they understand the goal and where we're trying to get.
I really like what you talked about, emotional investment. They're emotionally invested because they were the ones also who came up with it. And then it's also a challenge for them. So as you started doing this, was it an instant result that you all saw, or did you all have any ups and downs when you had to be the strong one to say, like, okay, this is what we agreed upon, and even if the phone's going to ring, I'm not going to pick it up?
Yeah, I would say my mom was really fast to change. She was very quick to go, okay, I understand, the goal. I understand what my child needs, and I'm going to give it to them. Where I was more the one who struggled to keep the boundary, more like mentally. I would say mentally, I still felt very connected to her, and I struggled to kind of detach. And if she ever was upset, and even if she's not asking me for help to fix it, I would just see that she's upset and be like, oh, I need to go and help her. And she was like, no, 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 this is mine. But it's still hard for me to just
Right.
kind of remind myself. But it's a process and it's getting a lot better.
It's a process. You said that. So there are a lot of people, sometimes what happens is that they start the journey and they find, and in your case, your mom changed faster. And for you, it had to take time to detach because this was something you had been doing for years. And it's not just easy. It's not a switch that you can turn it on and off with just a flick. We are talking about human beings, human emotions. What would you tell our listeners, somebody who's mustered up the courage and now taken the first step and they're going through that cycle? What can they do to stay the course?
I would say remind themselves why they wanted to start in the first place. Why did they feel creating boundaries was necessary to begin with? And usually it's they want to improve their life, right? Their quality of life, or they want to improve their relationships with the people they love. And I think those are great reasons to stay committed. So just keep reminding yourself why when it gets hard. It's, oh, I want to have a really good relationship with this person. I value this person. I want to improve the relationship, or I want to improve my life. I want to, be able to have more boundaries for X, Y, and Z reasons.
Yeah, the why. So important. Like, why do we do what we do? And that was the first thing that you had mentioned as we started our conversation. And that why is so important. Like, recognizing that why, because there will be difficult times. There will be times that you fall down. There will be times that you fail. And one of the things is also having realistic expectations of yourself, allowing that self-compassion, because things are going to take time to change. And when you have realistic expectations, when you expect yourself to fail, you'll continue the work because your why is more important than that little action. So how much time would you say took you and your mom to kind of get into that footing where you were comfortable and where you knew that, like, okay, now I can definitely be okay not picking up the phone?
I would say probably like 3 to 6 months
Hmm.
for me. For her, I think it was a lot faster, but for me, it was around 3 to 6 months.
And how would you say, like, the idea of writing her memoir come to you?
She actually asked me. She really wanted to have her life story written, but she didn't feel like she could write it. And so she asked if I would. And yeah, we kind of took on the challenge together.
And that's very courageous of her to put her life out there for everyone to read, dissect, evaluate.
Yes, especially after being so afraid for most of my childhood. She didn't tell anyone about her bipolar disorder because she was afraid of being judged. And then, yeah, her dad died of suicide. And she said, "That's
Mm.
it. I'm done being quiet. I need to do something good with this illness." And so she had me write her life story, and it's been helping a lot of people.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So can you share how long did it take you to write her memoir, and what was that journey like?
Yeah, it took 8 months to write and then another 8 months to edit. So it took just as long to edit as it did to write. But yeah, the journey was very hard. Anyone who's written a book can tell you it's very hard. I'm sure you know. But it was also very fulfilling to get all the emails of how much it's touched people. And so
Hmm.
we love going on Amazon and seeing the reviews come in. We're like, oh, it's helping people.
And when you were writing, were there moments when it was difficult to come to terms, or were there any situations where it became highly emotional?
Yeah, there were many times where, my mom wanted to be open about her illness, but there were certain things she didn't want to share. And I would kind of push back on her. I'm like, no, we got to put in there about the self-harming. We got to put in there about, this stuff. And she was like, no, they're going to think I'm a bad mom. And I said, I think when people are honest, they don't get met with as much judgment as they do compassion. And so we were very careful and we made sure to write the book in a way where people could understand her inner dialogue and understand where she was mentally when she made some of the choices she made. So that way it wasn't as cut and dry. It wasn't just an easy situation to judge. It was a very human experience.
Hmm. And you really brought that up beautifully. It's that there was a lot of grays between that black and white, that it was not just cut and dry where you can just kind of pick it up and say, like, okay, this is what happened, because it's a human being. And it's great that, like, now mental well-being is becoming more mainstream.
Mhm.
And yes, there is still stigma associated, and it's important that we continue raising awareness. So once you publish the book, how are you getting the word out there?
So we went on a book tour and we were interviewed in all 50 states on local and national TV. And that kind of got the word out, I would say. And so it's fun because we get emails from people in all these different states. And we're like, oh, they probably, watched the segment we were on or something. But we have it on audio, Kindle, and paperback just because I know
Mhm.
a lot of my uncles like to listen to books in the car. So I was like, all right, we got to do audio too.
And did you read your own book?
I did not. I did not. I wasn't confident in my ability to do different voices for characters.
No, most people don't. And people who are professionals, that's what they've done their whole of their lives. And it's important to recognize. So now, coming back to your little one, how would you say is your relationship with her?
Oh, it's so great. She's turning 2 in October. And so she's still just a tiny little thing, but she is fierce. She's very demanding and yeah, she's a very passionate little person. So I love seeing her develop and change each month.
And how do you see yourself as a mom? And what do you want to bring into the relationship so that she will grow to be a strong, confident young woman?
I feel very passionately about always making sure I'm helping her become her own person. So whether that's how she dresses herself or how she wants to eat her food, I want her to have a lot of autonomy, and I want her to feel capable to do life um, without me having to assist in everything. And so I try really hard to teach her just how to do practical skills so that way she can continue being confident in her ability.
Mm-hmm. And let's say you wrote love letter to your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were to write a love letter for your daughter who's going to grow up, let's say when she grows up, what would that look like?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say a love letter to my daughter would look like probably a little highlight reel of all of our moments together. I would probably write a little short book about, all my favorite times with her and the hard times, just so she can see, that sometimes the hard times are lovely too, because they show that you were willing to stick them out for each other because you thought they were worth it. But I think, it would be, I keep a journal of all of the things she does, and I would probably use that.
And what would you tell her so that she knows how to keep on building that strong relationship with you?
I would tell her that I love her and that she can trust her own intuition. I trust that she has a good head on her shoulders and that I'll always be there for her. That we are each other's, friends, and we are each other's cheerleaders, but I'm also her mom. I'm more her mom than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And what's your message to all the moms out there?
You're doing a great job. It's very easy to feel like you're not doing enough, but when it comes down to it, kids just want to be loved. That's really it. My mom loved me, and even despite, making some choices that were hurtful, because I knew she loved me, it was easy for me to love myself. And so as long as your kid feels valued and loved, they're going to turn out just fine.
That's beautiful. And going back to the initial journey, you did mention resentment. So how did you move from resentment to forgiveness to having a good relationship with her?
I'd say therapy was key, and then open communication with my mom. My mom's a very open book, so it's very easy to have hard conversations with her, which is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
I would say being able to tell her how hard it was for me made it easy to move on, because in relationships where you can express yourself fully, it's easier to heal. And so I felt like I was able to say what I needed to say and then have her validate me and say, I'm so sorry. And it made it very easy to move on. Where I think a lot of times we get stuck when we don't feel validated or don't have a place to share what we were feeling. Then you just kind of get hung up on it. Where I was lucky because I got to just move through it pretty quick.
Got it. So you did mention therapy. What would you say if somebody was looking for what your healing steps or something, milestones where people can recognize as you're sharing your journey that, yes, I'm healing?
Signs to recognize you're healing. I would say probably signs to recognize you're healing are that relationships with the people around you start feeling different. You'll kind of notice that maybe even the way you view yourself starts feeling different. But for me, I noticed the way I viewed my mom and I's relationship felt different. The way I viewed my husband and my relationship started to feel different. Things started to gradually shift. And you can't even put your finger on exactly how sometimes. It's feeling better. It feels easier. It feels less like a weight.
So you said it feels less like a weight.
Mm-hmm.
So when you shift from having a relationship as a burden, that yes, you're there in the relationship, and that's one of the signs probably that tells you that something needs to be done about it. whether it's relationship with yourself, like if you're stuck or self-sabotaging, and moving to a place where there is lightness and more life to it. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So Rachel, what would be your top 2 to 3 tips for our listeners so that they can get on a journey of healing and living a life with that lightness?
Yeah. I would say first identify the why of why you're doing a behavior that doesn't give you that lightness. Secondly, go to therapy and discuss with the people who are contributing to the heaviness and see how you can carve out, a different relationship. And then thirdly, just patience with yourself and with the people you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Where can people find you? Where can they find your memoir, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, I have An Impossible Life is the book, and it's on Amazon Kindle and paperback. And then I have an Instagram. It's just rachel.siddoway. And those are the ways. We also have a website, animpossiblelife.com, if they want to look at any of the stuff about the book.
Well, lovely. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. A pleasure having you. And we wish you, your mom, and your little one, and your whole family the best, and continue lighting the way for people to have better lives.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. And thank you, Juan, for all the technical support that you provide. So until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.